Genesis chapter 18 and 19, starting with 18, the three visitors. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw three men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way. Now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of the finest flour," which seahs, that is probably about 36 pounds or about 16 kilograms of flour, and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice, tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son."
Finally.
Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." Abraham pleads for Sodom. When the men got up to leave, they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" "What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5 people? If I find 45 there," he said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke to him. "What if only 40 are found there?" He said, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Chapter 19, Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you and you can do what you like with them.
What did he say?
But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness so that they could not find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand in the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city. For the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life, but I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." He said to him, "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it." That is why the town was called Zor. By the time Lot reached Zor, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities in the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Lot and his daughters. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zor and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zor. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. One day the older daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children. As is the custom all over the earth, let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with them and preserve our family line through our father."
What?
That night they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with them.
What?
He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and sleep with them so we can preserve our family line through our father."
What?
So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went in and slept with them.
What?
Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the Ammonites of today. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 2. Soon after Abraham's covenant of circumcision, he was visited by what appeared to be 3 men standing near him. But the text makes it clear that it was actually the Lord and 2 angels. Like Old Testament appearances of the angel of the Lord or the commander of the Lord's army, see Joshua 5:13 through 15. Now, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Judges 2, 1 through 5. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, "I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land I swore to give to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars, yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this?" And I have also said, I will not drive them out before you. They will become traps for you, and their gods will become snares to you. When the angel of the Lord had spoken these things to all the Israelites, the people wept aloud, and they called that place Bochum. There they offered sacrifices to the Lord. And 13:1-23. This was a Christophany, a pre-incarnate but visible manifestation of the second person of the Trinity. Verse 3-8. Abraham did not realize at the time who these visitors were. Nevertheless, he hurried to show them hospitality. God had decided to visit with Abraham, personally confirming what he had already promised many times. The picture here is a surprisingly intimate one. God sat and ate with Abraham for half a day, fellowshipping with him and surrounding his promise with his presence. Verse 9-12. Every time God interacted with Abraham, he reminded him of the same promise. This time, though, the promise got more specific. I will certainly come back to you in about a year's time, God said, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah, who had her ear to the tent door, overheard this audacious promise. She laughed to herself, scoffed at the silliness of the idea. Evidently, Abraham had failed to pass along the lesson he had just learned about the folly of laughing at God. Verse 13-15. God, of course, knew that Sarah was laughing, whether he heard it directly or not. In response, he asked the most important question of faith. Is anything impossible for the Lord? In other words, Sarah, did you forget who you are dealing with here? Do you think it's hard for a God who made billions of stars from literally nothing to make an old lady a mother? Most of our faith problems go back to how we answer this question. We look at the facts and say, I must be too old, too weak, too messed up. God can't work in this situation. But God invites us to look past the facts and see his face, to let the facts be swallowed up in faith. Is anything impossible for the Lord? No.
Nothing is impossible.
Verse 16-21. God had not just come to reinforce his promise to Abraham. He had come on a mission of judgment towards Sodom and Gomorrah, which he shared with Abraham as they prepared to leave. He would go down to see if what they have done justifies the judgment planned, which some interpreters think means that God actually needed on-the-ground intelligence. But as the fully omniscient God, of course, he already had all the information he needed. He just wanted to make it plain that the coming destruction was just. The presence of God and his angels in the way they were to be treated would further verify that the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah was immense and that their sin was extremely serious. It consisted of gross immorality, violence, and oppression of the poor. See Ezekiel 16:49-50. Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them, as you have seen. Verse 18-19. In the midst of this mess, God makes a beautiful statement about his vision for kingdom fathers. Men who represent God, the ultimate father, kingdom fathers, are chosen. If you're a man and you're a Christian, God has selected and elected you for a reason. You have a world-altering destiny that God intends you to fulfill. A kingdom father also bears the responsibility to command his children and his house after him to keep the way of the Lord. Specifically, fathers are to teach the model before their children the dual responsibilities of righteousness, obedience to God's moral standards, and justice, the equitable and impartial application of God's moral law in society. God intends for men to lead their families. Our generation's fundamental problem is family breakdown, which has led to a generation of children with few men to follow. So our youth either follow fools or they follow themselves, which can turn out to be the same thing. God intends to use his men to represent him in the building of strong families and the raising of kingdom kids. That may be a weighty responsibility, but it's also a thrilling opportunity. Don't let it pass you by. It would be in fulfilling his family responsibility that Abraham would see God's national promises fulfilled. This again highlights the crucial role that family plays in expanding God's kingdom agenda and building a stable society. Verse 22-26. With the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah imminent, God paused, yet again, to allow them another chance. This time, Abraham would be a part of the forbearing process. Abraham appealed to God's justice by saying, "Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" What follows is a peculiar scene that sounds akin to the kind of haggling you would hear in a fruit market. Abraham was attempting to talk God down, and surprisingly enough, God played along. "Will you sweep away the righteous? If there are 50 righteous people in the city?" Abraham asked. God responded, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Verse 27 through 33. The negotiation continued for 45, for 50, 30, 20, even just 10. Each time God responded to Abraham's compassionate intercession by granting him his request. God was not only allowing, but was also encouraging Abraham to keep asking for more. This entire scene corresponds with what we read in Matthew 5:13 through 16, where Jesus talks of believers as the salt of the earth and light of the world. Our job as members of God's kingdom is to act as a preserving influence in a dark and dying world. Note that God would have spared the entire city if there had been just 10 believers there. Righteous people, even a small minority of them, can promote righteousness in such a way that the entire society benefits. See Jeremiah 29:7. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will. Yeah. Very impactful. Very impactful. You know, when it says our jobs as members of God's kingdom is to act as a preserving influence in a dark and dying world, you know, when Jesus referred to us as the salt of the earth, you got to look at things in context. Fridges and freezers did not exist back then, so salt was used to preserve food, preserve meats. So when he says that so salt was extremely valuable. So when Jesus is referring to us as the salt of the earth, he's not only saying that we are valuable, that we have value, he's also calling on us to preserve his influence in a dark and dying world, as the commentary says. You know, well, those particular words, you know, dark and dying world. You know, we are meant to preserve God's word, Jesus's word, their teachings, and spread it, preserve it, spread it. Chapter 19, verses 1 through 5. The text shifts from Abraham's conversation to the angel's journey into Sodom, and immediately we see a contrast in the hospitality that these angels are offered. Yes, Lot prepared a feast and baked unleavened bread for them, but it was not long before the men of the city of Sodom, both young and old, began pounding on Lot's door, demanding to release the men so they could have sex with them. The outcry against Sodom, it seems, took only a few hours to prove its claims. Sodom had descended into such a den of sin that visitors to the city could not be left in public alone for even a few hours without fear of being raped. Verse 6 through 8. Initially, we might view Lot sympathetically. After all, he saw two men in danger and brought them in. He took a great risk in doing so. What he does next, however, shows how much of Sodom's wicked culture he had absorbed. In his attempt to protect his angelic guests, Lot offered to give the lustful, riotous crowd his two daughters so that they could be raped instead. We are and should be repulsed by such an offer, which reveals Lot's moral ties to Sodom as well as his failure to believe that God would protect him. This contrast becomes all the more plain once the angels themselves strike the crowd with blindness, thankfully preventing Lot from following through on his disgusting plan. Verse 9 through 14. With the mob beating down Lot's door, the angels decided to reveal God's plan to Lot. We are about to destroy this place, they warned. If you have anyone else here, anyone you want to rescue, now is the time to get them out. Lot tried, but was met with confusion and laughter from his daughter's husbands-to-be when he extended the invitation for them to leave town with him. There is no more dangerous place to be than hearing the warnings of God and shrugging them off as they are a joke, which tons of people are doing right now. Verse 15 through 29. The potential sons-in-law refused to leave Sodom because they did not believe God's wrath was real. But even Lot, the reason for this rescue mission, hesitated to leave when the time came. The angels had to drag him, his wife, and his daughters out of the city by hand because they were all too attached to it. They had become comfortable in a society that rejected God and his laws. Lot's wife showed the most hesitance and received the due punishment for it. Even though the angel strictly warned them, don't look back and don't stop anywhere on the plain, Lot's wife paused to look back and instantly became a pillar of salt. She thus became a permanent monument of the consequences of disobedience and worldliness. Only because of God's promise to Abraham were Lot and his 2 daughters, a mere 3 people out of the entire city, saved from destruction. The story of Sodom's destruction, while it clearly shows God's judgment against homosexuality, offers a much larger warning. In Luke 17:32, Jesus charged us to remember not the evil men of Sodom, but Lot's wife. Because our chief temptation is to become too attached to this world. Jesus teaches us to be in the world, working for the good of our neighbors, but not attached to the world in sinful ways, contaminated by its rebellion against God. We are not meant to be here. We live in a fallen world, and where so many people are going to end up going if they don't turn around and accept Christ and repent and start, believing this 100%, we're not meant to be there either. Verse 30 through 38. The conclusion to Lot's story is a pitiful one. His daughters, with their fiancés now dead, were so concerned about their marriage prospects that they devised a scheme to get Lot drunk and have sex with him. The plan worked, and both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. However, as with every scheme cooked up in the minds of sinful man, this success would eventually turn out to be a disaster. The 2 sons these daughters produced, Moab and Ben-Ammi, would become the patriarchs of the Moabites and the Ammonites, ongoing enemies of God's people. When we try to solve God's problems for him, we only create more problems for ourselves because it's going against his will and it's not having faith in him. You're just creating more problems for yourself. But that's the end of Genesis chapter 18 and 19. I hope everybody learned something. And like it says in the end of that commentary, when Jesus harkers back to this moment in Luke, when he says, remember Lot's wife, do not get attached to this world. Do not get attached to this earthly plane. Do not get attached to material possessions. This is all temporary. At the end of the day, I don't care about this. I want eternity. We should all want eternity. These are just temporary things that are on loan from God. Do not get attached to this world. Dive into this scripture. Follow Jesus. Believe in him 100% with your whole heart, your whole soul, that he died on that cross for you and for me, and that he rose 3 days later. It's simple. It's so simple. And that will lead to true repentance. It's so simple. But God bless everyone, and I will see y'all next time.